Thank you, Josh, for the introduction, and I want to thank the Michigan Christian Studies Center and those who lead it just for inviting me to be here. I'm very honored because when I look at the names, doing lectures, they represent the elder statesmen of their fields, and that I am not. But what I do think I might have to offer is just something that we all have in common, which is a thirst for beauty and meaning in our lives, and also a desire to clarify what beauty means. So, as Josh said, I'm Taylor. I work as a pianist, and I aspire to be a professional musician for the rest of my life. I love beautiful. I love the other arts, but my training is in Western classical music. And so tonight, I'd like to talk about beauty. Give an overview. This is not meant to be anything more than an overview of these concepts. I don't claim to be an expert. By way of dipping our toes into the lake, this complicated idea of beauty, I want to begin by showing you some images here. These three pieces are created before 1900. Consider the question, are these representative of beauty? Now, here are three other images, post-1900. So consider, are these beautiful? What is the difference between the first three images and the second three? For starters, the first three were created before 1900. The first three caught our eye with something. I would argue that it was beauty. The second three may have confused us, as they did me the first time I looked at them. They may have made us wonder what they meant, if they meant anything. Even such a quick tells us that we have some sort of innate intuition about these things. But when we are asked to describe this intuition and give it a solid explanation, we come up with nothing. We are confused. So the reason I wanted to give this talk, we are societally confused about beauty. What is it? Is it a thing of the past? Are there more important principles than beauty for an artist to pursue? For example, authenticity, the artist's voice, telling the truth about reality, playing a role in the progress of society, etc. So, as a caveat, my academic studies are in the area of Western art. But the principles I'm discussing can refer to whatever cultural tradition of art and beauty you come from. A quick outline of the talk. I'd like to begin by laying out some parameters for our understanding of beauty. Then I'd like to look at beauty in three different contexts. First, the Western tradition of art. Secondly, the view of ordinary people in society, you and me. And thirdly, from the Christian tradition. My goal tonight is to convince you that though modern society is skeptical of beauty and does not embrace it, the Christian tradition provides a framework for understanding and valuing beauty regardless of the time in which we live, by grounding the nature of beauty in a timeless being, God himself. First, let's get our bearings on beauty by setting up the parameters for it. The English philosopher Roger Scruton has written extensively and helpfully on the arts, and he gives us these parameters. First, beauty pleases us. It is an object of delight in which we take delight. Secondly, beauty is always a reason for attending to the thing that possesses that beauty. We pay attention to beautiful things. We actively engage with them and attend to that object. Thirdly, beauty is the subject matter of a judgment, the judgment of taste. The object that we perceive as beautiful lies outside of ourselves. It is distance and admired for its quality. And lastly, the judgment of taste is about the beautiful object, not about the subject's state of mind. So I, the subject, am viewing an object. My state of mind is in many ways relevant to the principles and qualities I perceive. It is outside of ourselves. And then finally, there are no second-hand judgments of beauty. To appreciate beauty, I can't rely on someone else's opinion. I can't read someone's opinion and come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, that thing is beautiful. I must experience it for myself. All right. So we begin with the first point. Beauty in the history of the Western tradition of art. A quick overview. Many of you are artists. You know a lot about these topics. So what I'm about is subjective in many ways, but I'm looking at beauty in its representation the last 100 years or so. So let's look at the Baroque and classical areas of art. All right. So Bernini's Apollo and Daphne. The Renaissance artists, the Baroque classical artists, saw beauty and proportion, order in the world. And they sought to depict it. Their forms are simple, well-balanced, proportional. This is what they saw and what we see as an objective viewpoint, what we call representational. Next, and I have to move so fast, the Romantics, Impressionists, Lists, and the host of their titles. Fleur de Lis by Robert Reed. They tried to evoke an image or a mood, something internal, showing us how they saw it. Still depicting objects in the world, to see a subject. Next, around the time of the 20th century, we turn towards German Expressionism, Surrealism, Dadaism, Franz Klein titled. These artworks are characterized by being consciously unrealistic, deliberately vague, and ambiguous. They portray an extreme of human emotion from everyday literal meaning. They are an exploration of the subconscious. These subjects visualize the trauma of war, of industrialization, and dehumanization. The project was a good one. They tried to honestly depict ugliness. Then, moving into the modern era, what I would call contemporary area, we see an explosion of style, which can barely be reduced to any names, but I'm going to call it deconstructive art. So, Inzokuki Ango from just this era, I would saying it deliberately transgresses tradition, debunks and deconstructs. It degrades the identity. An extreme example, one that I guess well, is a production of Mozart's from the Seraglio in 2004 with the Berlin Opera. And I can't show any images of that because staging of it depicted acts of masochism, extreme torture, and pornographic imagery. The modern artist sees beauty as being outdated. The modern artist sees beauty as being escapist from the truths of a harsh reality. The modern artist sees beauty as elitist, only appealing to the upper class. The modern artist sees beauty as emblematic of the old establishment, and the old establishment is embodied by the dead white male. Modern art desecrates beauty. Roger Scruton again, in 2011. The art of today cultivates a posture matching the ugliness of the things it portrays of its own. Beauty is said to be too sweet, too escapist, and too far from reality to serve our undeceived attention. Scruton goes on to call this era of modernism and postmodernism flushes tradition down the drain, down the toilet. So what do we see today in art? We see ideological and political. Oh. Yep.
Sorry.
No problem.
I don't have
Oh, thanks for coming. No, thanks for coming. We see, today in art, we see a separation of the artist from the public discourse and thinking of society. We see a posture of transgression against and not advocacy for. The result of this posture amongst the intelligentsia of society is that beauty is at best marginalized and at worst desecrated and in the tradition replaces the tradition. Of tradition knows no end. It will never stop. The reality is a deep thirst for meaning, a thirst for ultimate reality. One of these realities is truth. Can we, as artists, continue to neglect and desecrate beauty? So the second point I'd like to look at is beauty in our culture, according to what you and I think of it. We live in a culture that is post-industrial revolution of the. We are interested in efficiency, economics, and gadgets that help us faster. Contemporary artist Makoto Fujita describes our culture as one obsessed with productivity that has made art commodity. Think of Charles Campbell's soup cans from the 60s. Or even what Scruton calls the Disneyfication of art. No offense, anyone. Thomas Kincaid. Take a second to look at that. And I couldn't get one watermark. When we consume art as entertainment or as a product, we are not experiencing it for what it is. Recall that art is something that pleases us. Beauty pleases us. We here find that the philosophy of aesthetics distinguishes between pleasure, such as the pizza, which fills our stomachs, fills us with satiation. This could be applied to entertainment, something that's a need for being entertained. Not specific pleasure, replaceable pleasure. So this pizza could be replaced by other pizza, within reason. Any pizza will do. Any movie will do. Any comedy. The philosophy of aesthetics, on the other hand, argues that there's another pleasure, a pleasure in an object. This is compared to as a mother looks. The mother has contentment in who her child is, and the fact that she has the child in her hands. She has contentment in simply gazing upon the beauty of the child. She is pleased with the child. The baby is not replaceable. So if someone came along and took another baby that was exactly the same age, pretty similar, the mother would not like that. And it would just be plain weird. So this pleasure is in a specific object. In our culture, we focus on sensation, the sensation that transferable objects give to us. We focus on that. Contemplation. That makes we view beauty as a subjective value. It makes sense that we say commonly, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. However, if we understand it as a world of objects, which we back from at a distance, and observe the world in a way that we are able to understand and observe the qualities of those objects, then beauty is objective. And we rarely are. And an example from my personal experience is talking to musicians and young people about and asking them to listen to music, especially classical. Do you listen to music? The overwhelming response is, yes, I do while I'm doing homework. I listen in the background. But think about it this way. Consider that the works, say a work by Bach or Beethoven, a profound thinker from 300 years ago, 200 years ago. These profound say to you, and you put it in the background. If you decided to put the best conversationalist in your life, say your wife, on in the background, and just said, yeah, I listen to my wife in the background. That would create some strife. To truly understand how beauty is objective, we have to look outside. We have to start taking pleasure in the object, and ultimately satisfaction and it. The satisfaction that those objects point to. So next, and you could have predicted I would, let's look at the Christian tradition and how it defines beauty and provides clarity for us. The Christian tradition and its view of beauty. So, an idea inherent, deeply embedded in the Christian tradition is the idea of the transcendentals. There are other transcendentals, but this is the main three. This is God himself. Anything we find true, good, or beautiful has to be in God, in his nature. The unity of these elements. One writer said that beauty is the radiance of the true and the good. And beauty is what attracts. Beauty attracts us to the true and the good. In God, beauty is unity and goodness in his nature. But on earth, beauty is often seen as separate from the others because of the fallen state of our world and our human nature. These elements separated on earth. Take the example. God's truth, goodness, and beauty are refracted through the prism to us, the observers on earth. But these appear as partials, as you see partial colors radiating from the prism. These are individual strands of a complete truth, which only God has. Beauty and goodness are separate from fallen nature. For example, beauty has the power to we may have a proper desire to appreciate the beauty, but we may be betrayed. Similarly, can be separate. We see that in art history, there's true depictions of depravity, say Picasso's Guernica, or Eric Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front. God's radiance of his beauty never fails, only our ability to perceive it. So certain pieces of art, I would argue, can reflect. I would St. Matthew Passion by Bach. In unity, we see the nature of God. Nature can also do this. Heavens declare the glory of God. Consider in even such an image the unity of truth, goodness, and beauty. A final note on this point. It's beyond all human understanding. He created everything. Just because I don't initially think it's beautiful doesn't mean it's not beautiful. I posit as an example one of my now favorite composers who didn't used to be, Olivier Messiaen, and who famously used in his compositions. His design was to rotate birds and from birds from all over the world, and put them into into a singular piece of music, so that you could hear together bird songs that you would never hear in nature. This piece of understanding was crucial to my understanding of this music as beautiful and my apprehension of it. What else does the Christian tradition tell us about beauty? Importantly, beauty is a help to the person who suffers. How is this? Beauty attracts us to something other than ourselves. We are prone in suffering to turn inwards for answers. We look to ourselves for a way out. St. Augustine calls this in se, literally to curve in on oneself. We obsess over our problems. But beauty can bring us out of that destructive self-obsession. A particularly moving example that I came across a few years ago is a story told by Bill Murray, the actor. Early on in his years, living in Chicago, taking auditions, failing again and again in his career as hopefully as an actor, he was really brought to his end into the Art Institute of Chicago, and according to his account, he looked up and saw this painting, which he was familiar with at this point, but in this period it spoke to him in a whole new way. The Song of the Lark, this is an imperfect medium to show this, but this is a farm girl who has clearly been working, toiling, and slaving away throughout in her eyes there is a mixture of exhaustion, turmoil, hopelessness, fear. But Breton tells us that she's just heard the Song of the Lark. She looks up. And at the same time, we see the sun rising behind her. And Bill Murray says that he realized this, that he would live to see another day as well. He got another chance, just like her. For Bill, beauty contextualized his suffering. He found sympathy. He sympathized in the figure depicted, and the figure depicted sympathized with his state, and his own experience legitimized. This is certainly one benefit of this, but the other angle is that Bill Murray was brought outside of himself, and in doing so, he experienced. In this sense, we can each experience healing in our witness of beauty and our experience of beauty. In this sense, beauty is redemptive. How is beauty redemptive? Beauty shows us that the suffering through is not meaningless. Especially in the Christian tradition, we believe that our sufferings amount to an imperishable weight of glory, as Paul said. So our sufferings are redeemed in the here and now because they matter in eternity. They even mean something to God. Suffering is most fully demonstrated in the Christian tradition in the emblem of Christ on the cross, which is in itself the scene of suffering with a specific goal that has eternal ramifications, the salvation of men's souls. This leads me to a final point. Beauty comes at a cost. The clearest way we see this is, again, in the Christian tradition. The ultimate cost was paid by Christ on the cross, who is the ultimate picture of sacrifice. In this emblem, we see that the greatest rewards imaginable are purchased at the greatest cost imaginable. And we call this event beautiful. In the act of sacrifice, there is, in the present moment at least, seemingly, waste. There is excess. There is an outpouring that doesn't seem rational. We see this elsewhere in Scripture in the account from Matthew 26. I'll just read it. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." So Jesus was aware that there was waste involved in this act. And this act was an excessive act of beauty but Jesus calls it beautiful. We see the purpose of this act, that she did it to prepare him for burial, but it is immensely costly. I could go on, but I think I'm going to conclude around here. So a couple concluding thoughts are that our premises as we talk about beauty are important. As we converse with other people about beauty, the premise and agreeing on a premise is extremely helpful, if not entirely crucial. What is our premise? Again, just to reiterate, God is the source of beauty, which importantly is outside of ourselves. God created a world of objects which reflect his nature, and just as God's nature is the source of truth, goodness, and beauty, art can strive. Beauty is the goodness of the objects which God has created. Put another way, beauty is the vehicle truth and goodness are imparted to our understanding. So, in a world which, as we have seen, makes an enemy of beauty, what can here are some things you and I can do. Revisit works which you know to be beautiful. Take time to take pleasure in them. Consider, what do they have to teach? What do they have to teach you? Another one is read about these topics, and in which case I provided a QR to the bibliography that I've used to prepare the presentation. A lot of really intriguing concepts of other thinkers than myself. Whatever tradition you've learned to appreciate already, your attraction to beauty. Another one, space for beauty in your busy schedule. And make room to experience beauty. Consider it food for your soul. Lastly, consider yourself a garden. Seek to around you. Your impact on and what you beauty. And beyond with I will